I don't know if we're going to get to all of this. It's a lot.
No, again, like legitimately any direction you want to go, we can go.
Are we live? Yep, we're live. Okay, there you go. Behind the curtain, everybody. What we're going to talk about on the show. It's a sporty time of year, so it is warranted. Gary and Thor and Brendan Glasheen, a sports edition of The Slate. We are a DraftKings show. We air every Monday through Friday, right after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim. We've got 40 minutes. No Sims tonight because there's an NFL game. Jeff Ulrich will join us at some point, so we'll save the football for last. Gary, let me ask you this to start as a jumping off point. What are you watching tonight? Like, do you have any interest in Eagles Texans? I know you, look, I get it. If you're going to make a lineup, or if you're going to bet the game, there's interest. But what would you rather do? World Series, kind of a gross NBA slate, or this football game?
Yeah, I mean, the direct competition for game 5 of what has been a really good World Series so far is a 2 touchdown spread Thursday night game on an app.
Yeah.
And Magic Thunder. So if you're a baseball diehard like me, man, am I hoping to see some good numbers tonight on these ratings. But honestly, like, let's not kid ourselves. People are still going to watch Thursday Night Football. That's why Amazon paid billions of dollars to the rights for these games. Mm-hmm. People just like football. But I personally, will be watching Justin Verlander try to maybe get his first career win in a World Series game. Wouldn't that be nice?
0-6, the ERA is disgusting. And sometimes people say, yeah, he's disgusting. Like, good, it's not good for Justin Verlander. But like, if this pitching matchup, Verlander-Syndergaard, took place 5 years ago, we'd be super hyped up for this game. And just, of course, the way the sport has changed and adjusted, it's not the same. And Syndergaard might only last one turn through the order, the way that the Phillies have this rotation and this pitching staff, more so the bullpen, rested up. So you know what? We'll start baseball. Are you fading Noah Syndergaard? Are you going to ride Verlander?
I mean, if you're looking at this from a showdown perspective, there's no possible way you can use Syndergaard. I mean, we can just start with that. Okay. Starting pitchers have to be priced at a certain level. That's just how these MLB showdown slates work.
It's like quarterbacks in the NFL with
exactly
too, right?
But we know the game plan for Syndergaard. I mean, we saw it take place in their series against the Braves earlier on in the playoffs. Even if he pitches well, he's only going to go 3 innings. He might see like Altuve a second time. You know, maybe he sees Jeremy Pena. I don't think they want him to see Yordan Alvarez and Alex Bregman a second time. I think especially with how the off days in this series have worked, obviously they would have liked Aaron Nola to work deeper into last night's game, but they really haven't had to use that many of their high leverage arms the past 4 days. So I think they're pretty comfortable with where their bullpen's at. We've got a scheduled off day tomorrow, so they don't have to worry about game 6 and what potential bullpen usage tonight could mean for, what could possibly be a do or die game on Saturday. So they're going to be really aggressive. I think Rob Thompson, there's no scenario I see where Syndergaard throws like 4 or 5 innings. So from a fantasy perspective, that plus his just complete lack of a strikeout rate all of a sudden, which I guess is because of his complete lack of fastball velocity all of a sudden, he's just unusable. So in general, I'm of the opinion you almost have to captain a pitcher on a showdown slate. This might be the one night you don't have to do that, because obviously if that were the case, 100% of lineups would have Justin Verlander in the captain spot. And as you mentioned, an ERA over 6 so far for his career in the World Series. He's not been good so far in the 2022 playoffs, although I will say, to Verlander's credit, or at least to give him some sort of like saving grace, his opponent BABIP is up over 400 so far through 3 starts. His strand rate is like 57%, despite him having 11 strikeouts per 9 innings. These numbers are ridiculous. Like, he's getting really, really unlucky. But it's been happening for 15 years now in the World Series. And the Phillies are obviously a lineup that is designed to take advantage of mistakes. Like, we saw it in game 3. They didn't have a single hit with runners in scoring position, and it did not matter because you're always in scoring position when you can just hit dingers, which is what the Phillies do, particularly at Citizens Bank Park this year, where they had a 181 isolated power. So I think Verlander is someone you have to put into a lineup, but I do think if you're making multiple builds, you should be using him in the captain spot and using him in a utility spot. Don't just be putting him in the captain spot, because there is, let's even say like a 30% chance, or like 30% of the outcomes of this game, Verlander probably didn't pitch very well.
So I would imagine, and to your point, 5 home runs in that game 3 for the Phillies to take care of business and get out to a lead and handle that game pretty much from the first 5 innings on. That 5th inning has been something, these playoffs and this World Series. It's really that turning point inning for either side. As it relates to the Phillies, is this a spot where you look at them and go, okay, they didn't score any runs last game. This is a bounce back spot. Of course, they're not quite desperate. It's a 2-2 series, but ideally you're going to Houston up 3-2. That's what they're
looking. And look, they've showed their cards with starting Syndergaard, and I think you had to start Syndergaard. Now, I will say, with the way the rain postponement and delaying every single game of the series and pushing them back a day has sort of worked out for the Phillies, that was a clear advantage to them, because coming into the series, the clear area where Houston was superior to Philadelphia was their starting pitching depth. And we saw that. The 4th guy they sent to the mound last night in this series was part of a no-hitter. Christian Javier is their 4th best starter and a lot of teams' best starter. But now you're in a scenario where maybe Aaron Nola could be used to start a game 7. I know Rob Thompson said earlier tonight, like, Ranger Suarez is probably in that role. And honestly, Suarez has pitched better in this World Series than Aaron Nola has. But I think Nola is like at least available for bullpen usage possibly in a game 7. So I think they have a little bit of an advantage there. It's not a must win, but I think it's something like 70% of teams in a 2-2 series that win game 5 have gone on to win the series. So it's a crucial game. Let's say that. The clear advantage is for Houston. I mean, Justin Verlander versus Noah Syndergaard in the year 2022 is a massive advantage on paper to the Houston Astros. I think the Astros, you could even say, just because of their elite contact skills in combination with plus power, they're a rare team that can do that. They're better on the pitching side of this. They're better on the offensive side of this. They should be favored, and they are favored pretty heavily, despite the fact they are the road team in game 5. If you're the Phillies, and if you're building a lineup that, again, you're kind of looking for a captain who's maybe not one of the starting pitchers, I think I'm going to gravitate more towards the right-handed power hitters at the top of Philadelphia's lineup. As good as Bryce Harper has been throughout the entirety of the playoffs, as good as, well, inconsistent, but as flashy as the moments have been for Kyle Schwarber, because when he hits a bomb, he hits a bomb. Verlander was the best pitcher in baseball this season, best qualified pitcher in baseball at shutting down opposing left-handed hitters. Just a 235 WOBA to opposing left-handed bats, despite the fact it's an opposite hand matchup for Verlander. He's not been bad against right-handed hitters, but he's clearly been great against lefties. So for me, I would kind of lean towards the Rhys Hoskins of the world. Real Muto's, I think, a little too cheap on this slate, so maybe he's my number one option. But there is a clear advantage for Hoskins just hitting in that 2 spot. Like, that is such a great position to be hitting in DFS. So I would say if you're building a lineup where the game script in your head is Phillies win a close one and Verlander pitches well, but like Philadelphia does enough where they get this win, Hoskins, Real Muto are probably the captain in my version of that lineup.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, it's tough because we talk so much about Verlander, but the bullpen is also superb. So I guess you're hoping if you roster Verlander, and going off your point, you want to get Verlander in as many builds as possible or have a contrarian build without him. Right. The script would be get a quality-ish start out of Verlander and I guess hope that one of these Phillies guys emerges later in the game.
Well, I mean, the tough thing about as soon as you take Verlander out of the captain spot, because the whole value of putting a pitcher into the captain spot is obviously we're multiplying their point total by 1.5.
Right.
So you want to make sure it's someone who actually scores a point, even if it's only like 4. But we know pitchers are going to accumulate points. Whereas even the best hitter in baseball could have an 0 for 5 night, and suddenly you're multiplying by 0, and you don't want to do that. So Verlander doesn't have to be in every single one of your builds if he's in a utility spot, because part of his value is now taken away by the fact that we need that floor to be multiplied. So you could build a Phillies lineup with Hoskins or with Real Muto and just ditch Verlander altogether and hope that it's a blow up start. And that would actually, considering that no one's going to want to use Syndergaard outside of like maybe the utility spot, but even then I don't think so. Verlander's going to have such a high ownership that if you do want to try to like take this thing down without splitting that pot, not having Verlander in a lineup is the ultimate differentiation tactic. So there's definitely some value to that. I would also say another way that people are going to try to differentiate their lineups tonight, and this builds off of the Noah Syndergaard leash, pitch count, like whatever you want to call it.
Right.
We know the Phillies are going to have to use their bullpen a lot. And generally speaking, if you're thinking about like a positive script to use a Phillies pitcher in or a starting pitcher in, you kind of pair them with the closer, like a Sir Anthony Dominguez, and go, okay, the pitcher is going to get the win in this scenario. The closer is going to get the save. Like, we're all getting the maximum amount of points we can possibly get. However, I see this more as a scenario where you're going to need like the middle inning relief guys to come in and cover a lot of stuff in this game. So like Jose Alvarado, David Robertson, even like Andrew Bellotti. He's pitched 2 straight days, so maybe not him, but like Nick Nelson. There's a chance like Kyle Gibson is asked to like piggyback on Noah Syndergaard here. So generally the problem with putting relievers into the showdown lineup is, how can you guarantee that you know what the manager's thinking? How can you guarantee that you know this guy's going to go into a game? At this point, high leverage relievers on the Phillies, they're going to have to cover a bunch of innings. So I would almost guarantee we're going to see Eflin and Robertson in this game, if for no other reason than the Astros lineup is so right-handed, particularly at the bottom of the lineup. Like, once you get out of that Yordan Alvarez, Kyle Tucker 3-4-5 area, 6 straight right-handed batters coming back across the bottom of that lineup and coming up through the middle infield. That's a perfect spot to use Eflin. That's a perfect spot to use David Robertson in that cutter. So I think those 2 guys, whether it's the 4th and the 5th inning or the 7th and the 8th inning, like, they're going to get used. So I think putting them into the lineup is actually not as big a risk as it normally would be.
All right. Good stuff. Now, if we shift gears to the sports book, I mean, based on your analysis so far, I think you like Houston.
Yeah.
How
not
about
the sexiest bet, I know.
Yeah. How about the total? Because the rest is a factor with that off day that was built in due to the rain out earlier in the week. If we think Verlander shoves, Syndergaard gets the hook, but you have rested arms in that bullpen. I guess we are fearful of the Astros helping deliver on an over.
Yeah.
How do you feel about 7.5?
I would probably lean to the over. I don't feel super confident about it. I do just think the presence of Syndergaard against what you could argue is the best lineup in all of baseball, that's troublesome. I think that's a recipe for at least 3 or 4 runs, maybe more. Again, depending on how long he pitches. And again, like it's funny. I don't have any stats to say like Justin Verlander's going to be bad tonight. Everything I keep looking at says Verlander's going to be good because he's good and because he should be good. And because the reasons he's been bad so far in the playoffs, those aren't sustainable. But you just keep, it's almost like the Kershaw thing. And it's crazy that it's these like 2 pitchers who define this generation of baseball. One in the American League, one in the National League, Verlander and Kershaw. And they've both just got this elephant in the room whenever they reach the playoffs where you're just like, why do you stink suddenly? I don't understand. So I wouldn't necessarily bet the over. That's not like my favorite bet. But if I had to pick one or the other, I probably would just take the over because that's kind of where things are trending. If you want to make a bet that's like more specific to just the Verlander part of this, the Phillies team total for the first 5 innings is 1.5, and it's plus 105 to the over. Verlander has started 8 World Series games. He's given up at least 2 earned runs in 7 of those. And the only one he didn't give up 2 earned runs was 2006. So it's been 16 years. Again, using stats from almost 2 decades ago, kind of silly. But at plus money, with how Verlander's looked, is that plus 100 now? So it's moving. It's not the worst bet in the world. I will say my favorite bet on this slate, and this goes back to the Syndergaard element and the Astros scoring a lot of runs, Yordan Alvarez over 1.5 total bases. That's plus 115 right now. Alvarez has been, I'd say, disappointing. I think that's fair to say in the World Series. He's only got 1 extra base hit through 4 games. This is a perfect matchup. And maybe he only gets to face Syndergaard the one time. That might be all he needs. Noah Syndergaard struck out just 12% of the left-handed batters he faced this season. So we can already like set in stone that Alvarez is going to put a ball into play, which is amazing because Yordan Alvarez, 99th percentile expected WOBA on batted ball events, all the way up at like 550. When he makes contact, he crushes the baseball. He also specifically loves hitting changeups, right-handed changeups. Noah Syndergaard's favorite pitch, his most common pitch to throw a left-handed batter, is his changeup. He threw it 33% of the time this year. Alvarez had a 492 isolated power. He hit 10 home runs in 60 at-bats where the action pitch was a changeup from a right-handed pitcher. I think Alvarez might hit a home run like immediately if Noah Syndergaard throws him a changeup. So in general, like between the Phillies having to like piece together a bullpen game, I just think Alvarez is going to have the breakout Yordan Alvarez tonight. I think he's going to be like the story of Game 5.
Well, it makes you think though too, if he only gets through one time, if Syndergaard's only going to get through the order one time, do you at all consider an Astros first 5 team total over of 2.5? That's at plus money as well.
Yeah, so that started the day at 1.5, and I think it was juiced at minus 155 or something like that. So the book moved the line to 2.5, as they probably should have. Yeah, I've got no problem with that either. Because again, you're basing most of that bet off of this being a Syndergaard bad start, which, you know, the Astros are a team that make a lot of contact anyway. And Syndergaard's completely lost the ability to strike out batters and create whiffs. Now, he was better against right-handed batters. And again, this is a very right-handed lineup. But I have no faith that Noah Syndergaard is going to pitch well tonight. So I do think at plus money, that's a pretty good way to go.
In summary, that is what you feel. Look, all year, Syndergaard, when he was with the Angels, then he got dealt to the Phillies at the deadline. There's been a dip in his velocity. He's not quite the same guy he once was.
The Tommy John surgery really. Sometimes guys come back and they throw in harder. That's not the case with Noah Syndergaard. Yeah,
that's a great point. That's an example of someone, because typically that is the narrative. Oh, he's coming off the Tommy John. He'll be stronger than ever. And that is not the case for Thor. So,
but it's kind of crazy. Like I know there's been a lot of talk about what the average fastball velocity has been in this World Series versus like past World Series and how quickly this has moved. Syndergaard can still throw 94.5 miles per hour. And suddenly that's like, oh man, can't even light up the gun anymore. Sit down, Noah.
Can I also mention too, like we haven't had a cold night. Like we're in Philadelphia for crying out loud, and the weather in Philly right now is 65 degrees. We're not getting a super cold October. Yeah. We're in November now for crying out loud.
I don't know. Where are you right now? Are you in Boston?
Boston. Yeah, I'm in Boston.
Okay, so like I'm sure it's warm in Boston. It's warm in Toronto right now. Like it's unseasonably warm. So yeah.
Just bizarre. I mean, it's not. I mean, I get it. It's not 85 and sunny in July, and the ball's zipping out of the ballpark.
It's not crisp baseball weather. No.
Sure. So, all right, very good. Again, Jeff Ulrich's going to join us momentarily to discuss NFL before we wrap up. So we will get to Amazon's product tonight, which is Eagles and Texans. Eagles are laying 2 touchdowns. How about a quick NBA thought? There are 2 games tonight, but there is news in the NBA today.
Yeah.
What isn't there? So Joel Embiid is questionable to play tomorrow night for the Sixers. Oh, and by the way, James Harden is now out for a month. Mm-hmm. James Harden is out for a month. So much for that great start by James Harden. Look, good for him. Came in great shape. Seems like there was some real chemistry building between he and Doc Rivers off the court. Like, hey, trust me, I'll put you in the right positions, be the facilitator. He took less money. All good stuff about James Harden so far. Off season to this early part of the year. But Embiid in and out of the lineup, that's no surprise. And it's a right foot tendon strain for James Harden. I guess the pro side, I'm talking pro from a better or from a DFS side, Tyrese Maxey's ownership will go up. Tobias Harris will go up for sure. But more so Maxey, that next step he'll take as a player. But I mean, if I remember correctly, you were sort of high on the Sixers coming into the year based on the number, getting a good number on them to come out of the East. Where do you stand now on this team?
I mean, it's obviously this is a massive step backwards. And though I think the thing with the Eastern Conference, and obviously there's a best team in the East. I think we can all kind of say pretty definitively right now, like Milwaukee is the best team in the East, and they'll get Chris Middleton back at some point, and maybe they coast because that's what they kind of do. But I think that's almost sort of the point. Seeding might not matter that much in Eastern Conference, aside from just like being a top 6 seed. Like, what's the difference between being the 5 seed and having to play, possibly like a Philadelphia or a Boston, or squeaking in through the play-in tournament and having to play a Milwaukee? Like, or even like right now with the way Cleveland's playing, like there's just, it almost seems like, I don't want to say they're toss-ups, but aside from home court advantage, like when we finally get this like Eastern Conference whittled down to 8 teams, it's going to be very competitive first round series across the board. Like, I don't think there's going to be a single series that's like, maybe aside from like the 8-1, if it's like Milwaukee, Atlanta or something like that.
Yeah. But, well, I would also add before you keep going, like I think all of those teams, I mean, did you watch Cavs Celtics last night? I mean, I think all of these teams in the East have pretty good home court advantages, meaning like they're all rowdy, they're all into it. So I can't look at any one of these teams. Well, Brooklyn,
that's about the only one.
We don't count them. They don't belong in conversation right now at this point. Well, other conversations. We'll leave that to the side.
More serious conversations.
Yes, but it feels like there is legitimate home court advantage, meaning like it's a hostile environment no matter who's got home court. That's my point.
Yeah, but I guess what the point I'm trying to make is like for Philly, you just want to be a top 6 seed by the end of the year. Like, I think if you're someone who took a Philadelphia future for the championship, you probably don't care that much if it's like, oh, they didn't get a 2 seed, they got a 5 seed. Like, yeah, it might matter a little bit. I think you'd be lying to yourself if you weren't thinking you'd get a slightly better matchup.
Yep.
But I think there's legitimately 7 teams in the Eastern Conference that are nails. Like really good teams, like one of, I don't know, like one of Philadelphia, Brooklyn, Toronto, and like maybe even Cleveland. Maybe I'm doing the math wrong. Like one of them is going to have to play in the play-in tournament. Like that's insane. And maybe putting Brooklyn in that class at this point is a little whatever, but they still have Kevin Durant.
For now.
So for Philadelphia, if you took a future at this point, it's kind of like, all right, just make the dance. Like Harden's going to miss probably like 12 to 14 games. That's not great. I was surprised he finished yesterday's game. Like he was down for 2 or 3 minutes on the court and still played 35 minutes. I kind of thought maybe they dodged a bullet. I guess not. Tyrese Maxey, incredible. And I will say the one thing that's given me a little bit of faith in the 76ers in general is this is kind of like the saving grace of how that team was designed, where Embiid's out. So Harden's now the one, and Maxey is more than qualified to be a number 2 on a good team. Then you have Harden goes out. Okay, well, Embiid's the one again, and Maxey's still good enough to be a number 2. And then, you fill in the rest. It's not as good. Everyone has to move up a peg in the order, obviously, but they won their last 3 games. Like, they've been playing better. And I think a lot of that is just Maxey's been playing out of his mind. And if he really goes to that next level, you start having it's all hypothetical, obviously. But in theory, if you're going into a playoff series against Philadelphia and everyone's healthy and it's James Harden, Tyrese Maxey, and Joel Embiid, and Maxey's playing at anywhere close to this level, I mean, pick your poison. How do you stop that? Because it's going to be either a lot of Tyrese Maxey open shots in space, or you're going to have Joel Embiid having one-on-one matchups in the post. And neither one of those things is what you want if you're an opposing defense. So I don't know. This sucks. Maxey's going to be a fantasy stud for the next month. I think he's averaging 1.7 DraftKings points per minute played without Harden and without Embiid on the court so far this season. And even when Embiid comes back, Maxey's going to have to cover those minutes as like the number 1 option on the court while Embiid is resting. So he's going to be crazy from a fantasy perspective for a while now. But for Harden, do you start worrying that great conditioning, maybe he's not as active for the next month? I don't know. Does he come back in as great shape? It's not ideal, but at the same time, it's early enough in the season where I think you can kind of get past this if you're Philadelphia. But yeah, I have a future on them to win the championship. Wasn't psyched when I heard the news today.
Yeah. I mean, look, the Sixers, they seem aware based on how they built their roster in the offseason. They've got better depth with Korkmaz, House, Harrell, of course. They brought in Melton, who I think is a nice little piece.
He's been great. Yeah.
Yeah. So they've got, but can they make up for both being out, I guess? So they have to be very careful with how they manage it. The other team I think you didn't mention, but that could squeeze in if they get their stuff together, is Miami. But Jimmy Butler's been in and out of the lineup. So it's weird. I guess what it does do also is it throws a wrinkle into MVP discussions.
Sure.
Donovan Mitchell looks fantastic. I can't see how. I mean, Giannis will be Giannis, and Giannis is deserved to be. Giannis is like LeBron now in the East. He'll be mentioned every
yeah.
year.
I mean, MVP is really weird this season. I was looking at this morning, and you do just have that sometimes you just feel for the secondary fan bases and the secondary markets in the NBA, because you're right. Donovan Mitchell's been incredible. Pascal Siakam is basically averaging a triple-double this season.
Yep.
They're not going to win MVP. They're just not. This is DeMar DeRozan last season. It's a great story, and you love to see a player playing at that level. And it doesn't take anything away from Pascal Siakam playing as well as he's playing. It doesn't take anything away from Donovan Mitchell playing as well as he's playing.
Donovan Mitchell, I think, is a tick above DeMar DeRozan. No?
I don't. Maybe in notoriety.
Okay.
Maybe he's a name that gets on ESPN a little bit more often. I don't know. But because I don't get ESPN.
That's right. TSN.
But I don't know. Donovan, I just don't see Donovan Mitchell winning MVP. I just, especially now that Garland's back, to see what Garland did last night.
Yeah.
It really becomes apparent that Mitchell and he are going to have to kind of share the load, kind of managing this offense. I just don't think there's enough between Evan Mobley developing in his second year. Right. Karis LeVert has kind of found something these last couple games. I just don't know if there's a big enough piece of the pie for Mitchell to have to do what he'd have to do to win MVP. I think he's going to have a really good season. And it's almost like, we're not talking about Nikola Jokic at all to win MVP this year, because he's not. Let's be clear. He will not win MVP this year. But his start to the season, and he's even on the slate tonight, that small slate, he's averaging almost 7 points fewer per game this season than he was last season. His usage rate has gone from 32% to 23%. And it's fine because Michael Porter Jr. is back, because Jamal Murray's back, and you don't have to put this massive load on him. So I think at a certain point, if you're the Cavaliers and you think you're a really good team in the Eastern Conference, you don't want Donovan Mitchell taking 25 shots per game, because that's probably not the best version of the Cavaliers. So I just think this is going to be Giannis hasn't won one in a while. This could be like the Tatum year. If Boston really overcomes all this noise from the start of the season, if Robert Williams doesn't come back, maybe even longer than we expect, and Boston's the number 1 seed, like I had a Tatum MVP future last year, and I'm kind of upset he waited till the second half of the year to play like he did, because if he played like that all season, he would have been in that conversation. But Morant, I just think there's another level of superstar that, like, again, I live in Toronto. The Raptors are my favorite team.
Yep.
Pascal Siakam, I'm curious how long he would have to average a triple-double before his odds get under 15-1, because that's just what the NBA is. That's just kind of you accept it. That's just what it is.
Just a 2-game slate tonight. Not great matchups. We've got Golden State, who has been they're 3-5, folks, and their record against the spread has been brutal to start the season. 2-6 against the number. And they take on Paolo Banchero and the Magic. Terrence Ross is out tonight. Jalen Suggs is starting. And what is the other game tonight? It's Thunder.
It's Denver going up against the Thunder.
Wow. All right. Hey,
you know what? That one's actually kind
Thunder
of
playing okay.
Like, SGA is really good. Like, he's the type of player who suddenly, when you've got like all these lottery picks and like Giddey's back and he's useful, they're all right. Like, maybe he's not a superstar. Maybe we're not quite there yet.
Well, it goes right back to your MVP discussion about secondary markets, right?
Yeah. Like, he's scoring over 30 points a game. If he's doing that in Los Angeles, he's a superstar.
Nice job,
but he's good enough to, like, he makes the tide rise and he brings all the boats up with him. Like, he's very good. And I would actually say, if you're playing tonight's slate and you're looking for like the superstar to build around, I would much rather play SGA under 10K than paying up over 11,000 for Nikola Jokic for a lot of the reasons we just talked about. Like, Jokic is not the same guy he was last year. He does not have that same level of usage, where Gilgeous-Alexander, even with Giddey coming back their last game, still someone with a usage rate well over 30%, still averaging 1.5 DraftKings points per minute so far this season. I mean, he's been absolutely phenomenal. He's actually averaging the same amount of DraftKings points per minute as Jokic, which that's Jokic last season was like 1.8, 1.9. Now he's 1.5 because, he has actual players around him to kind of take some of that burden. So until Jokic's price point sort of adjusts a little bit for the fact that he's not the guy he was last season, I would much rather go with someone like SGA on a small slate like this.
Well, and Denver hasn't been all that good defensively either at the beginning of the season, bottom third of the league. We have about 10 minutes. Jeff Ulrich, I don't know if he's going to show up. Oh, is he here?
Hey.
Literally right here.
Yeah.
What's up, man? You all right?
I'm good. How you doing?
Good. You're a little late today. I'm just making sure everything's all right.
Oh, okay.
He didn't like hanging out with me.
No, I mean, come on, man. Like, it's 10 minutes to 6. Like, is everything okay?
Yeah. Sorry. Life happens, pal.
All right. I just was, Gary, and I asked that in a nice way. Says you're all right. That's all I said.
If that's nice, pal. I mean, I don't know what your mean is, but
I mean, look, I'm not here to see Moose and Glash fight. That's hurtful to the people.
Yeah, really. You sound like Steve. Stop being so mean. Anywho. All right, Jeff. Well, we'll put you on the spot. What do you like about this football game tonight? You're going to watch the game?
Yeah, I mean, I'll watch the Eagles dominate for 3 quarters and then turn it off probably.
You don't want to watch?
Actually, I'll watch the whole entire because I'm going to bet Boston Scott to score a touchdown. So
yeah, there you go.
That'll probably come in the 4th quarter.
It really feels like that's what we're going to get tonight. Like we could see Gardner Minshew for a quarter in this game tonight.
Yeah, maybe. Why not?
Yeah, I don't know how Houston's going to move the ball at all. Chris Moore is like their top receiver, and he was like on the field for 70% of the snaps. Didn't see a catch one ball last week. Like it's like Brevin Jordan, OJ Howard. The only thing that it feels like if Houston could come out and like get a touchdown early, and like maybe keep it close for a bit. But I mean, Jalen Hurts will just take over at some point. So I think that, spreading out the love through whether it's touchdown props or like looking at Devontae Smith props or something. But I don't really know what to do with the Texans. I mean, Dameon Pierce going to get a big workload, but do you really want to trust that? I mean, could also just wave the white flag at some point. Be like, we don't want to waste carries on our rookie either. So I don't know. I mean, like this one has, I just feel like just betting Philadelphia to cover when it was 13.5 was probably just the play. Like that's to me, and just call it a night. I really do.
No Brandon Cooks tonight for the Texans. Brevin Jordan, I guess, is like their go-to guy. He's like one of the guys on the anytime touchdown list that has shorter odds than a lot of other Texans receivers, pass catchers. Could be a big. I mean, Dameon Pierce had a garbage time touchdown last week.
Yep.
How about this though? Double-digit spreads this year. The under is 10-2. Could we see this total reflects how good we think the Eagles are at 45 points? Do we just swallow our pride and take the under on this and just say, I mean, Philadelphia, their team total points is 29.5, but they could easily get there in the first half, right? So how do we feel about an under in this game?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we could see, I just kept kind of like playing back the Texans Titans game in my head from last weekend, where
that's a nightmare.
Yeah. But despite running for like 300 yards, I don't want to take anything away from the Titans because, they had the rawest of raw quarterbacks starting in Malik Willis in that game.
Mm-hmm.
But, they ran for 300 yards and they still only scored 17 points. And I think the Eagles are going to be much more efficient than the Titans. Don't get me wrong, but the under might be the play because I don't know how the Texans move the ball at all. So I don't know what you're getting from them to help you get to 45 points. As you mentioned, Glash, the Eagles might just give up and play possum for like the last quarter and a half of this game. And on top of that, I just think this clock's going to be moving because the Eagles are going to run the ball because they can, and because Houston is the worst defense in football at stopping the run. So tick, 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 tick on that side. All Houston wants to do and has been able to do this season. And granted, they've played in like closer games than you would think so far this season. Like really aside from that Raiders game, they've all been kind of one-score games. So they've been able to
in that game, and that was a competitive game. The Raiders,
it's like the third quarter.
Fluky stuff happened in that.
Yeah, but they'll run the ball until they're down like 3 scores. So like this game starts at what, 8:20 usually, 8:17 is the kickoff or whatever. Yep. Like we might have like a 9:20 halftime show. Like this could just be moving quick.
We should bet on that. What time does the
halftime show start?
I mean, that feels like a Super Bowl bet, right?
It does feel like a massive total, doesn't it? Like, I mean, I just don't know how the Texans, and I talked about this earlier today, I don't know how the Texans get more than 14 points. Like that just feels like their ceiling, and that probably involves them coming out and like catching the Eagles off guard with like an early touchdown. But then once the Eagles wake up, I mean, you're kind of just left with garbage time. Like there's nobody for Davis Mills to get chunk plays from. Like, it's just, the under just feels like a big total at 45. Really does.
Steve Buchanan put out the latest splits from the DraftKings Sportsbook. Money's coming in on the over. 78% of the bets.
Well, it's fun, right? The Eagles are fun. They score points. Yeah. Like you get it.
Right. I get that too. 78% of the money, pardon me, is on the over. 55% of the bets on the over as well. As far as the spread, money is coming in on Philadelphia. I guess the only thought I now think about, and we'll get to the DFS before we wrap up in the next 5 minutes, is the way Dallas scored. And I know the Texans aren't Dallas. I get that. But like, that could be the other way too, is if they do pull starters and the Texans get garbage points at the end.
Sure. I mean, we just watched a Monday night game where I believe the score was 0-0 well into the second quarter.
Yeah.
And it cleared the over with ease by the end of it. Because once you get into these lopsided scripts and the backups start playing, like, then you're just playing preseason football. Like anything can happen. So I think like the ideal script for an under is Philadelphia is always up by like 17. So it's sort of like, all right, we have to keep playing defense, but it's close enough where the Texans are still like running the football for whatever reason. Like I think, but again, I think like 27-7, that kind of feels like what this game's going to be.
Okay. How do we want to build a showdown lineup for tonight?
I mean, there's like there feels like there's 2 captains to me. Well, yeah, it's Hurts and Pierce. I mean, I don't know who else you're going to take. Like it's, Hurts is just, he hasn't run that much lately, but this should be a really good spot for him to do it because Houston is probably their only hope is just to try and just load the line and just try and slow down Miles Sanders and then force Hurts to do it, which he will. And then, we saw AJ Brown get all the touchdowns last week, but we know that'll get spread out. So Hurts will get the upside from whoever he passes it to. And then the other side, we've already mentioned it. Like, I think Dameon Pierce does have upside. Maybe he does get there in garbage time. We've seen Dave Montgomery. We've seen some players have big rush games against the Eagles, and it's kind of come in that scenario where it's like they just take the pedal off late. It almost cost them a game against the Lions, actually, but that's what they did there too. So could see a similar thing happen with Dameon Pierce, get over 100. I think those are the two captain. Anyone else just feels like a shot in the dark kind of in this game to me.
Garion?
I think the nice thing about this slate with Hurts in particular, because like I'm a sucker for a dual threat quarterback in the captain spot. Like it's just the highest upside you can possibly get. Hurts comes into this game 0.72 DraftKings points per dropback. That's tied with Lamar Jackson, as you would expect, for the highest mark in all of football, because they're, the AFC and NFC version of that particular quarterback. Hurts leads the league in adjusted completion percentage. He leads the league in rushing attempts. He leads the league in rushing touchdowns for a quarterback. He's actually tied for the NFL lead in red zone carries, not among quarterbacks, among all players, which is really why, Miles Sanders seems like a guy who you could definitely kind of like get into the captain conversation. And maybe you can. Like, I don't hate that necessarily. I'd say he's probably my 3, but so much of Sanders' value is taking a back seat to the fact that Hurts calls his own numbers so often by the goal line, as he probably should. He's great at that. But Hurts, the highest upside player, one of the highest upside players in the league, clearly the highest upside player on this slate. So I think putting him in the captain spot, even at this price point, is warranted. And it helps because you do have some of these like bare minimum dart throws you can use on this slate to kind of counteract that big price tag. Like Tyron Johnson, I know only played 5 snaps last week, but Brandon Cooks played in that game. He just been signed off a practice squad. Like, Johnson's someone we've seen have success at the NFL level in the past, not even that far back, like 2020 with the Chargers. Like, he could play 30 snaps a night. He could play 40 snaps a night. Like, who knows? Like, they really don't have that many wide receivers. And he doesn't have to do anything. Like, if he catches 2 passes for 30 yards, he's like 30x value. So I think when you have the ability to use someone like that and kind of counteract that big price tag with Hurts, there's almost no reason not to use Hurts.
Yeah.
All right.
You can pair him with Quez Watkins too, who cheap, could catch a 40-yard touchdown. You could use Boston Scott.
Yeah,
the Eagles have a lot. The Eagles backups just have value because they're probably going to get play because they're such a deep team. And so, yeah, Hurts definitely is easy to fit in tonight. No brainer. Sanders could, I guess like the other path that you take with the Eagles offense is, yeah, you captain Sanders. You say he gets like maybe finally finds the end zone a couple times, breaks 100 yards. It could certainly happen. Just happened with Derrick Henry. It's a pretty thin play, but that's like I like that better than the wide receivers here, because I just feel like the wide receivers are going to be spread. There's not going to be enough volume here. So yeah, Sanders would be like the kind of YOLO, not even YOLO, just the third option. And yeah, I'd rank him behind Pierce though.
What receiver or pass catcher who has the highest total for yards? Wow. Philip Dorsett at 36.5.
Yeah.
That's where we're at.
And everyone's going to be piling in on Dorsett here, right, too, which is scary. So I'd probably rather take a shot with the tight ends here. I don't think that there's going to be many yards anyways. And you're really just hoping for a touchdown from any one of the receivers to really get upside from them, from the Texas standpoint, the Texan standpoint. So I'd go with Jordan or OJ Howard. That's where I think the points will probably come from, if they come, which they probably won't.
And even Glash, would you mind checking Pierce's receptions prop? Like, I'm thinking it's probably 2.5.
It was 2.5 last week. I think it is 2.5. Yeah.
Okay. I would be probably pretty in on the over there too. We saw last week there were some concerns about whether or not Pierce was like an every down kind of running back, but Rex Burkhead only played 10 snaps. Like, I think they're just getting to the point where they're like, we can have this guy in the field at all times. He's caught 16 passes their last 4 games. Like, he's becoming involved in this passing offense. And if for no other reason than they have no one else to throw to, and they will have passing downs in this game, I think Pierce could definitely catch a couple dump offs. Like, I would not mind taking the over on 2.5 there.
Okay. Davis Mills, 212.5. That seems high. But, game script is everything. If they're trailing, but like Gary said, it feels like they'll just run. But I don't know. I mean, you got me convinced to want to watch the game now and throw a little something on the game. So good job, guys. A big sporty night. Jeff, thanks for stopping by. I'm glad everything's all right. I was actually being serious initially, but now I'm joking. Folks, enjoy the game. We have the sweat tomorrow at 11 a.m. And we have the slate again after the 4 o'clock Madden Sim. For Gary and Thorne, Jeff Ulrich.
I'm okay.
Okay, good. See, that's all I was asking. Eamon,
All good.
Daniel, you all have a great night. Enjoy the sporty night on this Thursday.